Previously on Rome, rise and fall of an empire. The democratic Roman Republic is no more. After a relentless drive to seize absolute power, Julius Caesar is assassinated by aristocrats, hoping to maintain the Senate as the center of Rome's political authority. But the effort fails, and the age of emperors begins with the reign of Caesar Augustus. Now, in the 1st century BC, under the reign of the new Emperor Augustus, a new Roman Empire is on a mission of rapid expansion and sets its sights on the savage land beyond the Rhine. But the latest and greatest conquest collapses into a bloodbath. Germanic tribes spurn the imperial yoke and defy Roman authority, hobbling imperial ambitions, redrawing history, and jeopardizing the empire. Gaul, 1st century BC. Rome takes its first steps to world domination. Spurred on by unprecedented growth, the empire believes the rest of the world will eagerly bask in its civilizing light. Emperor Augustus consolidates power after the murder of his great-uncle Julius Caesar, and Rome rises and spreads its influence across the known world.
Augustus was Julius Caesar's relative who became, in our terms, the first Roman emperor. Augustus saved the Republic in a way that Julius Caesar had been unable to do.
This was the beginning of the real peak of Roman power. It was rapidly expanding its imperial frontiers and had had a series of stunning military victories. Many in Rome felt that the state was invincible.
The beloved Augustus has triumphed in his difficult task of melding the democratic values of the old republic under the power and leadership of an emperor.
Augustus saved the Republic by becoming its #1 and sole leader, in fact, but by saying and convincing other people that the Republic was still what it had always been, a cooperation among people up and down the social ladder for the good of all.
After 35 years of successful rule, Augustus sees his greatest achievement as the massive expansion of Roman territory. To him, it is more than simple military conquest. There is a higher mission as well. Romans, after all, are superior.
The Romans also felt that they had a mission to take Roman civilization to other people who didn't have it. So they thought that they had a cultural mission to bring law and, as they saw it, justice to people who were living without it, the people they called barbarians.
With Gaul successfully becoming a Roman province, the newborn Roman Empire eyes land beyond the Rhine in an area that will come to be called Germania. The tribes beyond the Rhine live precariously, vying for power or turf through bloody raids against each other. Some tribes even extend their raiding into Roman territory, which Rome will not tolerate. The empire sees these barbarians as savage, unpredictable, dangerous, and worth conquering.
There has been much debate about what Rome was doing east of the Rhine. The big question is, was Rome trying to establish a new province between the Rhine and the Elbe, or was Rome simply conducting punitive raids to try to stop incursions that had been coming across the Rhine from the east? Most scholarly opinion now suggests that Rome was really trying to establish a new province.
By 9 BC, Emperor Augustus sends General Tiberius on a campaign across the Rhine.
The relationship between the Romans and Germans is very problematic. You have people who are willing to work with the Romans and people who hate the Romans. And what this goes back to at times, no doubt, is a jockeying for power among the German tribes within ancient Germany, Germania itself.
Tiberius, a well-connected and effective soldier, is heir apparent to the imperial throne. In Germania, he courts a leader of the Cheruscian tribe, seeing a potential ally.
The Romans became allies of some of these barbarian groups because those groups wanted Roman help against their fellow barbarian enemies. And the Romans wanted to expand their territorial control and also their, as they saw it, civilizing mission further north.
The Cheruscian chieftain welcomes an alliance with Rome, though his people have no interest in Roman ways. They crave the empire's protection and prestige.
They had a lot to gain from the relationship with Rome, particularly their ruling elite. Economically, there is access to Roman products. What's more important is that Roman products enable a person to show status.
The young Germanic prince, happily playing Roman soldier, will learn to be a shrewd player of Roman politics. Raised in two worlds under the proud traditions of his people and the might and glory of the empire, he will become a Roman officer and a Germanic king. His name is Arminius. For more than a decade, the empire has enjoyed relative peace with the tribes across the Rhine, thanks to the strong military of Emperor Augustus.
Augustus is a military dictator who is going to have to fight constantly in order to establish an empire that's actually going to be stable for a full 2 centuries.
Arminius, the young Germanic prince now in his 20s, has become an auxiliary commander in the empire's service. These auxiliary troops recruited from Rome's provinces are a crucial supplement to the Roman army's 28 official legions.
Augustus had to make sure that people understood that he was doing what traditional Roman leaders had always done: lead Rome to glorious and profitable conquest in war.
In 6 AD, Roman general Tiberius travels from Germania to quell a violent revolt in the volatile Roman province of Pannonia, roughly modern Hungary and Austria. Tiberius directs all his forces in Germany against the insurgents, who are rejecting Rome's taxation and intrusion into their way of life.
When the Romans tried to push Romanization of the barbarians, to make them live more like Romans at a pace faster than the barbarians wanted to go, then the barbarians said, "We won't go there."
The revolt against Rome will last 3 grueling years, stretching the Roman army thin. Emperor Augustus sends in auxiliary troops. Arminius fights in this campaign, mastering the techniques of Roman warfare and distinguishing himself to his Roman superiors. First-century Roman historian Velleius Paterculus.
Brave in action and sharp in mind, Arminius had an intelligence quite beyond the ordinary barbarian, and he showed in his manner and in his eyes the fire of the mind within.
Arminius is also sharp enough to see how brutally Rome can treat its provinces, crushing their autonomy.
I think he might have seen many of the native Pannonians in very much the same position as his peoples back in northern Germany. And he may well have seen a reflection of his own community in some of those places in Pannonia.
Still, in service to the empire, Arminius fights on, mustering his auxiliary forces alongside the Roman troops of General Tiberius. As Rome fights to keep Pannonia in line, back in Germania, the empire building progresses smoothly. Arminius's people, constructing roads and other civil projects under Roman watch, are beginning to see the benefit of Rome's intrusion.
For the barbarians, especially those against the Rhine, who really weren't living in a Roman world, they could still see the attractions of what we call Romanization. developing a life more based on trade and commerce, building larger communities as opposed to very small separate communities the way they had traditionally lived.
3rd century historian Cassius Dio.
The barbarians were adapting themselves to Roman ways, were becoming accustomed to holding markets, and were meeting peaceably. They were becoming different without knowing it.
In 7 AD, Emperor Augustus appoints his close friend Quintilius Varus to govern the land east of the Rhine.
Varus is a relatively capable commander in a pinch, but there's also an intimation that we get from our sources that he's not the best character in the world.
His description by historian Velleius Paterculus is less than flattering.
Quintilius Varus was a man of mild character and of a quiet disposition, somewhat slow in mind as he was in body, and more accustomed to the leisure of the camp than to actual service in war.
The peaceful situation in Germania suits his relaxed disposition. Varus has befriended Arminius, who has returned to Germania and his people as a respected Roman citizen. In Arminius, Rome sees a strong ally and lasting peace. The Germans play by Rome's rules, but only to keep the Romans off their backs.
The Germans weren't happy about being forced to go to Roman courts and let a Roman decide their disputes, for which they had long-standing, homegrown ways of solving their problems with.
The resentment begins to build, even though the surface looks calm, according to Velleius.
The Germans are a race to lying born. By trumping up a series of fictitious lawsuits, provoking one another in disputes, and settling quarrels by law rather than arms, they appear to express their gratitude to Roman justice, while pretending their own barbaric nature was being softened.
Varius had experience governing people who'd been used to being governed. Nothing could be farther from the experience and the expectations of the Germanic peoples.
The intrusion, according to historian Cassius Dio, pushes Arminius and the other tribal leaders to action.
Besides issuing orders to them as if they were actually slaves of the Romans, Varus extracted money as he would from subject nations. To this, they were in no mood to submit, for the leaders longed for their former power, and the masses preferred their former ways.
So when the Germanic peoples along the Rhine decided they'd had enough of Varus and his haughty administration, his imposition of Roman ways, especially in court, they decided to fool Varus, to get rid of him.
And no one is in a better position to do that than Arminius. For 3 years, Roman General Tiberius has been struggling to crush a violent rebellion in the province of Pannonia. At last, in 9 AD, he is seeing his efforts rewarded. As the insurgents are defeated or surrender, victory is within his grasp. But as order is restored in Pannonia, unknown to the Romans, the situation in Germania is about to explode into chaos. In this supposedly peaceful province, Roman Governor General Varus has pushed to establish Roman rule and pushed the Germans too far. The proud German barbarians, under their leader Arminius, have grown tired of paying Roman taxes and being treated as slaves on their own lands. Refusing subservience to Rome, they decide to take up arms against the most powerful army in the world. Not all of the German chieftains are convinced by the plan. One, a man named Segestes, fears the risks are too great, but Arminius sways the others.
For a man like Arminius, at this point in his career, and he is acknowledged as the dominant person among his people. This is a great honor for him. To become just a client in some kind of provincial structure, an unclear category, is something he just didn't want to do.